In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Toni Talks podcast. I hope everybody's having a nice quarantine, over these past few weeks. Today we got a new guest, never seen before. Give it up for... You introduce yourself now.
My name is Ronan.
Yeah, I feel like, we're not doing ASMR, so...
Oh, okay.
So just keep it regular. But anyway, what's up, Ronan? For all my audience members, me and Ronan, we go back. We were like, we've been chopping it up for a while. All right, like when I say a while, I'm talking about years. But yeah, it's good to have you on the show, Ronan. What's up? What's cracking? What's on your mind?
Not much at the moment. Doing some zoology-related projects as per usual. Yeah. How about yourself?
This man, zoologist and animal rights activist. Somewhat. But what was I gonna say? So for all these people who are doing quarantine now, and they're all just sitting at home and being bored, my emails and my messages, I've just been being spammed by fans. It's like, and when I say fans, I mean like 10 people, but but like I've been just being spammed by fans, man. Like, oh yeah, you got to make another episode. I was like, all right, I got to make another episode. Technically, this was supposed to be the last episode of the season, but now that we're all quarantined, I feel like people need my podcast more than ever. You know what I mean? Just like something to help them pass the time, even if it's just for background music or background sound, or if they need it just for, if they actually like listening to it on their own, or if they need it to study. You know what I mean? Like, that's usually what podcasts are made for. So I thought, you know what? Maybe I should double the number of episodes, and just start getting a bigger variety of people to join. So I thought to myself, I got to find some interesting people to get on this podcast. I can't just have the same looping people over and over again. Even though there are some fan favorites, there are some people out there who are a very big part of the Toni Talks community. A shout out to Ala, Martin, and Vivian. You guys are you technically the highest rated. Like, you're on some of the highest rated episodes of the podcast. But I decided, you know what? Let's bring in some new people. I'll call in some favors, call in some of my buddies, and we'll see what kind of conversations we can come up with and chop it up. So Ronan, tell me more about yourself. Let's give the audience a good idea of like what kind of person you are.
So I am very much an animal nerd in every respect. Much of everything I do in my life regards animals or nature in some way, shape, or form. I'm planning to pursue studying zoology or environmental science of some degree. I've kept so many different types of animals. I run a zoology-themed YouTube channel that centers around different animal-themed games and real-life experiences, pet care advice, etc., etc. Yeah, it's really quite the journey. I work at a nature center. Yeah, I'm just essentially the quintessential nerd.
This man is like the closest thing you'll ever get to a real-life druid. This man is so in love with nature that I'm pretty sure his favorite type of burger is animal-style burgers. Have you ever had an animal-style burger? Those things are delicious.
I have not, actually. I'm not sure I've heard.
You gotta have an animal-style burger, man. Like onions, like they use a special sauce, and like the way they actually make it is completely different. It's animal-style because it's all messy. So that's the reason why they call it. But it's like it's like the quintessential.
Like some weird concoction like the tarantula burgers I was hearing about.
Wait, what? What do you mean tarantula burgers? No, I have not heard. Back. Like tarantula burgers, like that sounds like something you'd eat like on Halloween, like like somebody would be selling on like on like this like the street vendor, like a street vendor, like, hey, get your tarantula burgers, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, they just imagine instead of a beef patty, it's a cooked tarantula.
But would it be good though? But from what I heard, insects like certain. I heard that like certain animals, especially like arachnids and those kinds of spiders and animals, they taste like shrimp. They have a shrimpy like taste to it. So I would assume like if you like shrimp burgers, for anybody who ever had a shrimp burger, I think I would assume it would taste along those lines. But I'm pretty sure they remove all the hairs and stuff, right? Beforehand.
Well, they would have to. Okay, give me a second to summon my nerd knowledge. Well, thinking about... So tarantulas have these hairs, particularly on the back of their abdomen, called urticating hairs. And it's actually a defense mechanism that they'll kick off those hairs into the air, and they're highly irritating. So I imagine that they would have to remove those but I'm not sure if they probably don't open the exoskeleton, if I had to guess. Because if you're eating something like a cricket, you just eat like the whole cricket. You don't eat like
Yeah, from what I heard, they're
parts.
like crunchy, like a crunchy, like
Yeah, it
more.
probably would be
It's like
kind of
eating.
weirdly crunchy. I wonder what you would do with the fangs. Like, would you, or the venom glands? You wouldn't want to eat the venom glands.
I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure, depending on how you cook it, I would assume that the venom would evaporate.
Oh yeah, the venom would be. Oh, what's the proper word for that? My biology teacher would give me a look right now for not remembering.
So
Denaturing.
not
Yeah,
evaporation.
denaturing. It's
Yeah.
like when proteins heat up to a certain extent or change to a pH beyond their range, they denature, which basically means that like proteins have a structural shape, and then they unravel when they come out of their area that they would prefer to be in. So like at a certain pH or a certain temperature, and then they no longer function the way they should. So that's probably what happens to the venom. I don't know.
That also brings up the age-old question, which is, does what if you have a bottle of venom, right? And you leave it sitting there for years. If the venom expires, does it become more venomous or does it become less venomous?
I don't know the answer to that. That'd be a great thing to look up.
That would be an interesting thing, but I think it would assume. I think it would assume like the chemical composition of the venom itself.
I guess it
I think that's
depends
what would
on
matter.
how long you wait. If you wait long enough for like DNA to denature, it's probably fine. Well, it depends on how it's stored too, because if you put it in an environment where like bacteria can get into it, then that would be problematic for a human to consume. But it would not retain the toxic qualities that it had, I think. I'm not
I
sure.
would assume so. You know what I mean? And also,
Yeah.
if venom expires, it means it's not usable anymore. And if you're using venom, then I'm assuming what you're trying to do is to kill someone. And if it's expired, then I would assume it doesn't have that killing capability anymore. So therefore, the venom is useless, which means it's expired.
Have you guys talked about the difference between venom and poison on this podcast?
Actually, we have never talked about that, but I actually know that, and I think I learned it from you specifically. So let me take a crack at it. Venom is when I think it's when animals like inject it into other beings. That's what venom is, and then like poison is when like they secrete it, and then another being ingests it. I think it has to do with injection versus ingestion.
Yes, generally that is the case. There are some cases where it's a little unclear, but for the most part, venom is injected while poison is ingested. So a lot of poisonous animals aren't necessarily super dangerous unless you like don't wash your hands after handling them or something along those lines.
Exactly. If you get like bitten by a poison dart frog, you're gonna be fine. But like if you start like rubbing your hands on it, that's when you're gonna die.
Well, yeah, and it also depends on the type of dart frog and like the gold. Is it the gold dart frog or golden dart frog? Is
I
the
think the golden dart
toxic?
frog.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that like is you don't touch it in the wild. Ooh, but did you know that domesticated poison dart frogs don't actually have any poison?
Yeah, because from what I found out is that poison dart frogs specifically produce their own, like they don't produce their own poison. They eat these very specific insects that like all are also poisonous, but they eat it in such an amount that the poison condenses and then is excreted from the skin.
Yeah,
And
they
since they're
somehow
in
like
captivity,
convert their poison into their own poison.
exactly. But in captivity, since they don't have access to those certain insects, I would assume that they just don't secrete poison because they just don't have any reserves of
Yeah.
poison. You see, I'm big brain too, Mr. Ronan. I'm big brain too.
Did you know that there are some snakes that are both venomous and poisonous?
No, I did not know that, and I feel like that is very scary to know. It's like you can't pick it up and you can't go near it. Like just being in its general vicinity is just instant death.
I mean, the ones that I've heard about,
And you know something that I always wondered, like if it exists out there, and the one thing that really scares me is the idea of like imagine airborne like venom or poison, like an animal just like sick, like just releases a poisonous gas, and then like anything in its general vicinity is just dead.
I mean, there's some things kind of like that. Um, like, have you heard of spitting cobras?
Yeah, of course, but that's more like to me that's more like
It's a
like
fluid.
firing. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
fluid and they're like firing it, you know what I mean? It's like it has to actually hit the target. What I'm thinking of is like an actual like spray, like we're talking about like smoke or like vapor just just emitting from this creature, and then like if you're in the general area like a toxic gas, like, and you inhale that, you're pretty much dead. To me that's something that, like, if that exists out there, I'm probably never going to go outside ever again.
There has to be something that has some kind of similar thing. I
What
know.
I imagine, like there are like gas based attacks in the animal kingdom. Like if you look at skunks and stuff like that, they project, like they do like tear gas, kind of like like tear gas like kind of attacks. But like those are more for stunning and blinding than actual, like, ingesting of any kind of sort of like poisonous substance. To
Well,
me,
yeah, gas wouldn't be. I mean, it might be efficient for killing, but it would be like you'd have to create a pretty potent gas, and a lot of things that use like gas as a deterrent are really just taking advantage of their bowels in order to do so. Um, so it would have to be some kind of extreme adaptation, but I'm not sure how you would go about that. That's kind of an interesting thought.
should we just like mechanically engineer these creatures and just set them into the wild and just see what happens?
Absolutely not.
We should totally do that. Let's just drop them off in different places. Drop
We've
one in the
got
Arctic,
enough
drop one in the
problems
desert.
with goldfish and all these other invasive species. That's like,
Wait,
no,
wait.
thank you.
Can goldfish survive in the wild?
Goldfish are highly invasive. I don't think people realize this enough. They can grow to be like several feet in length.
Bruh, nah. You're
I've
like, no,
seen
you're
one over a foot in length.
bruh. Yeah, you're capping. Like a goldfish that's a foot in length.
Yes.
But where would you even find such a thing? Like, where would you even go to find these goldfish?
Look, people take their goldfish and they put it in the wild, which is illegal in like most places, and you will get fined heavily for it because they are so invasive and they eat like all the native fish because they're a carp and they are hungry constantly. They eat just about everything, and as long as they have enough room and enough food, they will just continue to grow. And so somebody releases their little pet goldfish, and in a couple years, it's like bigger than a koi, and it's just this massive goldfish swimming around. Like, there's a pond near my house that I was working on my Eagle Scout project at, and I I saw this big fish off in the distance, and it was this big retaining pond, but in the center was just this goldfish swimming around, and it was easily like 2 feet. It was just this massive behemoth. And I called him Big Chungus, of course, because that's the best name you can give to a goldfish.
Exactly.
But they also populate to a huge degree. So if you put in like a couple, you can have a whole swarm of these massive goldfish just eating everything. So it's really not good. Never release your pets. It's always a terrible idea.
Why does everything that humans domesticate turn into like outrageous killing machines that can like 1v1 almost every single wild animal?
Well, probably because of like partially of how we domesticate things, because we like selectively breed certain things. Um, but one example is with like dogs. So dogs are descended from wolves from various points of origin, and these wolves were then bred for specific purposes. And one of those purposes was to fight against other wolves. And so you can have dogs that can act as like top predators in environments where, for instance, there might not be wolves or dogs already, like there was in Australia, and then
Oh yeah, with the dingo.
dingoes. Exactly. Now we have
Yes.
things like the Thessaline that are probably extinct, and dingoes absolutely everywhere because dogs are just more efficient predators than marsupials. Um,
I think we
so
should. I think we should explain to the people what a dingo is before we continue, because I don't know about my. I don't think my audience base is that little, like, like knowledgeable when it comes to very specific animal species. But for those who don't know what dingoes are a very specific breed of wild dog in Australia that came about because when the settlers came in, they brought their dogs with them. But then a good portion of them got loose, and then they started living in the wild, and they just started hunting, and they slowly just evolved and kind of became their own like thing.
yeah, I
You
think
know?
they're a subspecies or a species at this point. I don't know.
Yeah, because they lost a lot of their dog traits. Like you cannot like it's very hard to domesticate dingoes. You know, what I mean, they
Yeah.
lost that domestication like gene. They kept everything else. They kept like the speed, the enhanced speed, like the intelligence and all that like that we like bred them to be. But they lost that whole like like domestication factor, like the thing that would like the thing like that bonding factor that would
Yeah, they
allow them
look
to
a little
bond with
bit like
humans.
tan
So yeah, no,
huskies.
don't go trying to pet or domesticate dingoes.
Yeah, not a good idea.
It is not a good idea. But yeah, man. So when they showed up, they basically changed the whole dynamic of the Australian ecosystem because now you have these smart, like fast, strong, intelligent, like animals just chasing these poor, like these poor, like species. But the thing about Australia is that Australia is just such an OP continent, like where all the animals are such deadly creatures that it didn't like it sure did shift the ecosystem a bit, but like dingoes like compared to all the other Australian like animals, dingoes really do have to fight hard to like to have any sort of like position in the food chain in Australia.
Well, that's true to some extent and untrue to others. So it's true to the extent that there are lots of dangerous creatures in Australia, but it is also untrue to the extent that because Australia is basically a very big island, it split off from the rest of the global ecosystems a long, long time ago. So before placental mammals were widespread, which basically
Placental mammals being mammals who have placentas, I would assume.
yeah. So everything that isn't a marsupial.
And anything that doesn't have a pouch. That's what he's trying to say.
Yeah. So when placental mammals started taking over the rest of the world, Australia was spared from that, and placental mammals are just more efficient than marsupials for a variety of reasons involving energy conserving and all other kinds of molecular things. So most of the main continents, marsupials, were wiped out and replaced with placental mammals. So if those mammals, like rabbits and stuff, are then moved to places like Australia, where there are still marsupials, they can compete with the marsupials and drive some of them to extinction. So what true to some degrees, untrue to others. So they are successful, but it is also a hazardous environment.
I have a very unethical experiment that I always wanted to try, but I know for a fact they would never get approved by any like sort of like large organization. But the thing is, like a question: are humans technically evasive species?
Yes, I think so.
All right. The thing about me is that people think that humans are very OP when it comes to a lot of things. Like they think humans are very OP and like because we're basically we basically shaped the world to be we shaped the world to be our own. How do I put it? Like we shaped the world to be to like instead of adapting to the world, we adapt the world to us. And I feel like that's probably one of the most broken abilities that any animal can have. I think the only other animals that really share that specific that very like specific trait would be like ants and like certain like in beavers and like certain other animals that do that, but not to the same extent that we do. But like I said, like to me, like that's a very like a big indicator of like that's of one of the most broken abilities that any animal can have. Just the ability to change instead of evolving and changing to your environment, you just reach a level where you can change the environment to fit your needs. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. Although there is a limit to that ability, as we're facing right now with the whole climate crisis.
Exactly.
At some point, we crash and burn and kill ourselves, or we learn how to fix it.
But the crazy thing about it is that I always wondered that like if we took a group of humans, right? But like not human humans. Like when I mean humans, I mean like imagine like humans who have never had any interaction with any other humans ever, and they don't know how to do human stuff like read and learn and like they don't like they like what I mean, like they have like all they have is like their basic instincts. Because I was reading like these like I was reading these articles like in like looking up these like these people, like there's these kids who've been abandoned when they were like really little, or like when they were born, and they were raised by animals, right? And they possess a lot more animal traits than they possess human traits. they eventually do learn how to do stuff like talking and stuff like that, but they're usually are more like stuck to that animalistic side. So I wonder if you took a bunch of like humans and you put them in a completely blank earth with no knowledge of how to do things like make fire or cut down wood or make tools or anything like that, just like a basic human, like in the most like the most literal form of that, like, you know, and then just put them in like in a new earth. I would wonder like if they could. I wonder if they could, like, you know, how fast it would, like how fast they could create, like recreate everything that we have now. You know what I mean?
Well, I have somewhat of a hypothesis.
But the only thing that really goes against that theory, in my opinion, is the fact that I think most people would go argue against this, but I think we've evolved to be weaker in a way. Like, I think since we really don't have to, like, survival of the fittest isn't really a thing for us anymore, except for on an intelligence basis, of course, yes, you know. But like I think on many other aspects, and survival of the fittest isn't really a factor anymore for us. I feel like we're not as like hardcore and like as optimized as we used to be for surviving in the wild.
We're not as specialized as we used to be. I would agree with that.
So I feel like we could get bodied pretty hard by like every other animal if we didn't have like weapons or anything. If we really did start from zero again, I feel like I don't know if like we could get over that first curve.
Well, maybe.
You know?
We would have to reverse our diet a little bit, because things like our tool use came over our like several species to get to us. It took a lot of time in order to develop tool use and fire building and those things, and our ancestors had all of those things. And so that's why our teeth have changed to be more omnivorous rather than herbivorous, and our other organs and stuff have changed, like the appendix and all that stuff.
Yeah, the appendix used to allow us to eat raw meat, but now it's just there. It's just there.
The new theory is it's like a holding place for bacteria, but it helped with some form of digestion in the past, whether it was meat or a lot more like fibrous material, so like straight up grass. Which we can no longer like digest fully.
Yeah.
So our diets changed, and we started evolving because of our tool use to fit better with what we could create. So it would be dubious it would definitely be a much lower survival rate among people and a much lower lifespan. But it depends on what people you have and in what environment you put them in. Because we have a weird amount of variation. We're more diverse as an individual population, but less diverse on other species on a global scale. Because we have no other like subspecies of humans, etc., etc. We're actually
exactly
undiverse, but we have such a broad amount of different locations that can survive.
Yeah, have you ever noticed that like there's like 17, like there's almost like 500 like types of dogs, and they all look extremely different from each other, but then like you have like 5 cats. You have like 5 different cats.
Just as many breeds of cat.
I know, but like there's not that many physical differences. Like, you know, there's big cats and small cats, but I mean like they don't really look that different from each other, except, you know, coat wise. You know, their coats and
like body shape,
like fur,
and things like that.
They're not really specialized for things. You know what I mean?
I mean, yeah, but if you look at wild cats, they don't look extremely dissimilar in a lot of cases, but they do have other types of specialized traits. They just don't look as dramatically different.
True.
So you have, like, I forget what it's called. I think it's like a swamp cat, or maybe the fishing cat is probably what I'm thinking of. But it's a cat that actually, like, dives in water after its prey. And then you have things like the serval that can jump extraordinarily high in the air to try to catch, like, birds as they take off or other things like that. And they have these really long legs. So you have slightly different types of body shapes, but as a general whole, I get what you're talking about in that regard. Like, we don't have a long cat. Speaking of cats, cats are a huge problem in the global ecosystem. So, cats are probably one of the most invasive species of, like, all time, probably, next to humans, just because they kill so many things. Cats are one of the most efficient predator builds, I would like to say. that we have had so far, or at least in our like modern era. So they just, when they move into a place where the ecosystem has not had them before, or like domestic cats sized kind of creatures, then everything just gets slaughtered, from birds to amphibians to reptiles to fish. It just decimates local ecosystems. So please, humans, do not let your cats outside. That is not good. And if you must let your cat outside, then please get one of those like loud collars that make sure that at least the birds are safe, so you can help at least one group of organisms survive. I've actually encountered a stray cat in my neighborhood. It shows up on all of our doorstep cameras that we have around here, and it just walks around, and I've noticed there are a lot less birds and just about everything in the neighborhood now since this cat has started walking around, and I'm tempted to get one of those have a heart traps and just like catch it and start bringing it to all my neighbors and asking, hey, is this your cat? If so, please keep it inside. And if not, I will bring it to the the shelter for you. Because you do not know how to take care of your cat.
You know, I read somewhere that there's like a big, like, you know, there's a big population of feral cats in places like Hawaii. Like, there's an entire island of just, like, you know, feral cats.
That doesn't surprise me too much. Japan, for some reason, has lots of, like, islands of blank, and I'm not entirely sure why that is. The only one I really have any knowledge about is the island of rabbits, which supposedly goes something along the lines of, during, I think it was World War II, there was some kind of lab that was using rabbits to test something, and the rabbits were let out, and the laboratory was shut down, and the island was abandoned for some reason, and rabbits just took over the island, because rabbits apparently are not naturally occurring in Japan, or at least in that island, and so they rose up and ate all the vegetation. And so now that there's, like, no vegetation near height on the island, there's a bunch of domestic rabbits that just rely on tourists to feed them. So people come to this island looking to, like, be swarmed with bunnies, and they'll get, like, a bucket of food or something, and they'll just hold it, and rabbits will actively, like, swarm them to try to get the food, and you can just feed a bunch of rabbits on this island, and it's adorable, but it's also really sad, because there's not enough food for all these rabbits, and so literally, like, their only source of food is the tourists that are coming to give them food. I feel like
if there was ever such thing as, like, you know what? No, never mind. That's a very that's a very no thought. Anyway, well, yeah. Have you ever had rabbit? You ever eaten rabbit?
I've not eaten rabbit. Mainly because I've had two pet rabbits, and it just would feel weird to eat a rabbit to me.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Because they were like one of our staple hunting animals for like the longest time. You know what I mean? Like one of the easiest to catch. So yeah. For me when I had it, for me it was more of like a thing of like learning. You know what I mean? Like this is what my ancestors had to like hunt and, you know, run around and catch for like a majority of the time. You know? Yeah. For me, it's more of a learning experience. I mean, it's like for me, usually when I do things like that, like, you know, it's supposed to be more of a learning experience than anything else.
I did that with, I believe it was octopus, when I went to Tanzania at one point, which was an awesome experience. One of the restaurants had octopus, and I tried it, and I just remember it was kind of like gummy and stiff, and it wasn't very good. And I couldn't see why people wanted to eat octopus.
To be fair, how was it cooked though? Was it just boiled or like did you, like chop it up? Because to me, the best way to consume octopus is fried, like deep fried, like chicken style. You know, deep
okay,
like deep.
Things good deep fried because they cover.
I know, but like
oil.
There's a specific technique. It's called calamari. You ever had calamari? You know, it's like octopus calamari. Onion rings.
Maybe. Oh yeah. Wait, I think I have had calamari. I seem to recall it made me a tiny bit sick, but you know.
Oh, well, because it probably wasn't cooked well. You know, like seafood is one of those things that like you have to either eat it raw and you have to eat it fresh, or you eat it as cooked as possible. I mean, you don't try to experiment too much with like seafood. You don't want like a medium rare like carp. You know what I mean? You can't do that with fish.
Have you ever seen those videos of like people finding nematodes in their seafood?
Nematodes. Isn't that those things from the 8th SpongeBob's house in one episode?
Yeah, I got the same reaction when I was talking to another friend about nematodes. But nematodes are actual animals. They're a whole phylum worth of organisms. They're essentially like little roundworms, and they come in a huge variety of like types. But a lot of them are parasitic. And some nematodes are terrifying in how they work, and I'm not sure if I should go too in depth with them because it is kind of gross. But a lot of times, like, they'll go through different stages where they're in different parts of a host, and often they live in the digestive system. And so when fish and stuff get consumed from the wild, sometimes they have these parasitic nematodes in them. And so if you're serving it like raw, then people find these little roundworms in their fish taco, and it is disgusting. They look
Are
like
they edible?
raw pasta. it's
Are they edible?
Yes, but then you would have them, like, living in your digestive system.
Oh
You
no,
would get
never mind then.
infestation, probably. Because
Ew,
that's how they
okay.
get spread. They'll go through, like, an intermediate host.
Okay, then never mind.
So,
But bro, I saw something the other day that like you ever have those moments where like on the outside you're completely blank, but on the inside you're like screaming at the top of your lungs.
yeah, kind of.
You know what I mean? Where it's just like on the outside you seem perfectly fine, but on the inside, like if you could scream right now, you would. Like this, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like the Wilhelm scream. Yeah, I learned about this very specific type of parasite that exists in the ocean, and basically what it does is that like fish, so it's a parasite, and it eats like first in its larval stages, it just eats regular like like sea floor like scraps, and when it grows big enough, it tries to get eaten by a fish, and then once it gets eaten by a fish, it cuts off the fish's tongue, and then it acts as the fish's tongue,
Oh, that's annoying.
and then like it eats portions of the food that like of the fish when the fish eats other stuff, and basically it keeps living inside the fish until it like kills the fish from starvation because it keeps eating the fish's food every time the fish eats something. But it literally cuts off the fish's tongue and acts as its tongue, and to me that's like like I get shivers. You know what I mean? Like pins and needles. Like oh my god, why did I have to learn this information?
It's a really rare strategy in nature is to be a parasite towards something and have that thing die. Because a lot of times if you have a parasitic organism, they want their host to survive because they want to survive, so they can continue.
Oh no! Usually after they grow, like they kill the other host, then they just upgrade to bigger and bigger fish. Because then they become subsequently bigger, and then like they get eaten by bigger fish, and then you know what I mean?
So yeah.
Or the fish that they were living in gets eaten by another fish. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's a weird tactic, but I can see it working.
But like every time I think about it, I just imagine something crawling into your mouth, cutting off your tongue, and it's just like wiggling in there and acting as your tongue.
I mean, there are worse things. I have heard worse things.
I've heard of worse things also, but like to me, for some reason, that to me is just like every time I think about it, I'm like, you know what I mean? Like why, why is nature this? But I mean, nature, like people like to think that Mother Nature is this like very soft and kind being, like the way it's depicted in arts and in like in movies and artwork and like just general human perception. Mother Nature is just this like kind and loving like person,
pretty.
like loving person that like embraces all animals and stuff like that. But like if you look at nature, like legit, nature is just like a cutthroat, like survival of the fittest. Whoever it makes it kind of person, you know what I mean? Like the way people imagine nature is like a woman that's like very loving, like a mother. But like to me, no, nature is like a mafia boss. You know what I mean? Like, I think that explains why humans are just the way they are. Because like we had to go through a lot before we got to this point, And I feel like if we ever went back to like living in nature by nature's rules, then that's when we're going to suffer for real.
Yeah, it
would
definitely be a big oofy.
That would be a big
things that are deceptively pretty. How many people have heard of the orchid mantis? I would like to know that.
The orchid mantis. Oh, actually, yeah, you do have you did used to have one of them, didn't you? It was like a.
I had a male orchid mantis named Pixie. So,
huh.
Yeah,
okay then.
Once this quarantine's over, I'm actually planning on getting another nymph. Which, for those of you who don't know, is basically a baby insect. And so, orchid mantids are really cool because they pretend to be orchid flowers, but they their coloration actually looks brighter and more vivid to insects because their vision is based on different factors than human vision, so they actively stand out more than flowers. So when one of these mantids wants to hunt, instead of hiding among flowers, it'll stand out on its own, and then the bugs will fly to it, like a butterfly or moth or fly or something, and then get snagged by this unsuspecting flower-looking thing and just get nommed upon. But they're really pretty looking because they're like white and pink.
Do you think that's the concept? Like ambush tactics have been something that's been around for like, millenniums. Like a lot of animals imply ambush tactics, and especially like disguise tactics that then go off into like ambush tactics. But you ever wonder like if like mimics are like based off of those kind of ambush tactics? Like, could you imagine like a human version of that?
Well, potentially. It would be hard to evolve something that could mimic a person or something appealing to a person.
No, I don't even mean that. Like, imagine like you go to grab a pencil, and you have the pencil in your hands. You realize it's it's an insect, and it just crawls and bites off one of your fingers or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, or even more terrifying. Imagine you toilet, right? And you go to sit down, and the moment you sit down, you just get engulfed entirely. You know what I mean? Like, or scary things like that. Or imagine you're putting on a scarf, and then you realize it's not a scarf, it's a snake, and it just starts like constricting you. You know what I mean? Like. It's a good thing. It's a good thing that humans are not like, humans. We don't have those kinds of predators. But like, imagine like, imagine you see a delicious like cupcake, like, or cake, just like on the kitchen counter, and you go to grab it, and then like it just opens up to show a row of teeth and just like starts and bites your arm, man. You know what I mean? Got your nose. You know what I mean? It's scary. It's scary, man. It's scary.
Yeah, I'm sure mimics were based off of some kind of fear relating to that, but I think the insect world is much more over the top when it comes to survival strategies because there's
insects to me are just like biological machines. They are evolved for warfare. they try the most outrageous and the most like intricate tactics of any other animal. I feel like when you look at modern warfare and you look at insect warfare, there's a lot of things in common.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Although I've also seen some extremely hardcore vertebrates. Like I think it's a newt or a salamander, one of the two. But when threatened, I believe it breaks its ribs. And what it does is it like pierces the sides of its skin, like along its belly, and it folds its ribs outward to actually like poke through the skin. And on those ribs is either venom or poison. That's one of the cases where it's a debate because it's injected, but it's acting like poison as a defense rather than an attack. So, like, if you try to grab it or bite it or something, you get injected with the poison. And so it's just a really hardcore newt.
It's basically like a Wolverine newt. You know what I mean? Like, it just, like, bone claws. Starts ripping and shredding.
Newt, because that thing exists with frogs. So there's a frog that
actually does that. I swear, man.
Basically, yes. It stabs like one of its fingers or all of its fingers. I can't remember, but it breaks its finger and then like it stabs it through its skin and acts like a claw to stab things with.
I don't know why we're laughing because if these things were. I don't know why we're laughing because if these things were human-sized, then
it's terrifying. But it's like it's terrifying to the extent that it's funny.
Could you imagine how many small animals, if they were like human-sized, how just like horrifying and absolutely deadly they would be?
Yeah.
Like imagine like a human-sized centipede.
Oh no, that's a horror.
Bro.
We stopped that immediately.
Bro, I just imagine imagine you're just chilling in your house, like in your second story window, and you're playing games in your room, and then you look outside and like you look at the pale moonlight, and then it's on your window, you just see like this giant centipede crawling.
I forgot that exists.
up the wall of your house.
but Tony, that existed at one point in time.
Oh no.
It wasn't a centipede, it was a millipede called Arthropleura. But it existed before dinosaurs. I keep forgetting what the name of that era is. Carboniferous. There we go. Carboniferous. So it was the era of giant arthropods, is essentially what it's known for. You had dragonflies, like, with several foot long wingspan, probably about, like, 2 feet long at the wings. And then Arthropleura was this massive millipede, and easily longer than a person at max length. But it was just, so if you guys don't know the difference between millipedes and centipedes, centipedes tend to be flatter bodied, and they're carnivorous, and tend to be very fast. Millipedes tend to have rounder bodies and are herbivorous, so it wouldn't be as much of a threat. But
I thought the difference was that millipedes have 100 legs, and then millipedes have 1,000 legs, and centipedes have 100 legs.
Well, that's the origin of the name. It's not technically true, but
yeah, because this makes me wonder who sat down and counted all of those legs. Who had the time to sit down and spend a couple of afternoons just counting the legs of each individual insect just to make sure that all of them have 100 legs.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Millipedes generally look like they have more legs.
They do, don't they?
Well, in some cases. I'm not sure about all cases. But it's mainly determined by, actual closeness in terms of genetics and all of that stuff. So there's always a bunch of curveballs. That's just the nature of studying animals and nature in general.
I read somewhere, a bit off topic, I read some lobsters are immortal. Can you
I don't think
back that statement up?
I'm not sure that they have, a limit.
No, what I mean by that is that they can't really die of natural causes. When I say natural causes, I mean they can't die of old age. They can only die of being consumed or accident.
I don't actually know the full answer to that. I know that lobsters are one of the organisms that never stop growing throughout their lives. So they probably have something in regards to stem cells that lets them continuously rejuvenate, and so they probably don't age. But I'm not sure that they could continue to live forever, because at some point they would reach a degree where their body is unstable. Particularly with arthropods, our atmosphere doesn't have the right consistency that arthropods need to get to the titanic sizes that they were in the Carboniferous period. So that's why we don't have giant millipedes today, is arthropods physically can't get that big because there's not enough oxygen in the atmosphere. So maybe not with that organism, but it's potentially true that something like that could theoretically live forever in the right circumstances, but it's really hard to continue to survive in a natural environment. So
I would say though, doesn't the ocean technically, I think it goes by different rules. You know what I mean? Because I feel like a lot, the ocean can sustain a lot bigger animals because of first off the reduced gravity, and then second off because I don't know if this is true, but I don't know if the oxygen intake if fish ingest more oxygen than we do through their method.
I'm not sure about it would depend on where they live in the ocean. But it definitely can support larger life forms. The larger life forms tend to be aquatic because they don't have to support their weight and use the energy to maintain that weight. And so things like the blue whale, obviously aquatic. So it makes sense that could occur. And I think the limits for size in arthropods is definitely larger in the ocean, but I think the limit is still consistent because there's only so much oxygen in the atmosphere, regardless of whether it's stored in the actual air under the atmosphere or in the water molecules.
What about king crabs, though? Have you ever seen a king crab? Those things are giant.
Yeah, I have. I haven't seen one in real life, and they are pretty massive. I'm not sure what the limit for arthropod size is. Actually, wait, I think I do know the largest living arthropod. I think it's the coconut crab, which is surprising because it does live on land for most of its life. I think only the larval form can survive in water, and then the land form can only survive on land. And they're actually quite terrifying because they're omnivores that are extremely powerful and can, break open coconuts with their claws. But they are also capable of grabbing birds, for instance, while they're sleeping, and then just breaking their wings and eating them slowly.
I feel like arthropods and just insects in general are just soulless creatures that are basically just nature's like ultimate killing machines. You know what I mean? No remorse, no morality,
I
just
mean, sometimes.
consume.
Sometimes it feels a little like that, but other times you have these moments where it's just like, particularly if you've kept pet arthropods, it just feels like there's something more than just dumb brain there. Like, particularly with things like jumping spiders, while they don't have as many brain cells because they're not as large, their brain cells are far more complex than human brain cells, and so they can analyze things like distance that they have to jump and all these other things super quickly. Like, they do these very complex calculations extremely quickly with highly accurate results. And then
I'm not. What I'm trying to say is, I'm not trying to call them stupid. I'm not saying these things are dumb animals. What I'm trying to say is that they're intelligent, but they are amoral creatures. You know what I mean? Like they are remorseless, and you cannot bargain with them. You can't it's like can insects even feel the emotions? You know what I mean? Like can you inflict fear upon these creatures? You know what I mean?
Well, you can inflict fear upon these creatures, that's for sure. I've experienced that to a degree. Or if maybe not fear, some other type of, I would say emotion, but it's a very complicated question when you're studying animal behavior. As to how to classify things, everything from intelligence to emotion, all these inner ideas in regards to another species, because of this concept called an Umwelt. So an Umwelt is essentially your perspective as the organism you are. So as a human being, it is easy to see your environment. You can look at another human being and you can kind of guess what they might be feeling in relation to what you might be feeling. But with another species, they occupy a totally different perspective of the world. And that's their Umwelt, and so it's hard to know what exactly they feel. And so maybe they have a whole different array of emotions that we don't have access to, and that's what drives them rather than our emotions. So it's hard to judge these things because we can't really get a grasp on what the interior motives of a different species are. Personally, I like to think that all living creatures have some capacity of feelings or emotions, but it's hard to tell, and it is something that's continuously explored to this day.
To me, I kind of have like, I have a tier list when I have a tier list when it comes to things like animals that like are close to like intelligent in emotion to humans, and then animals that are to me basically like the closest thing they'll ever get to like soulless beings in existence. Like what I mean, like, or like ruthless, remorseless, like amoral, just like machines. Like on the top of the list, it's like most mammals. I feel like most mammals have that capability of like like socializing and acting and like interacting in ways that are kind of like, what's the word for it? Are kind of like reminiscent of us. You know what I mean? Like, so like some of them can communicate with each other and like they could have like familial bonds, and some of them can like like teach and act in ways that people would say are kind of human in a way. You know what I mean? I feel like mammals are the ones that are at the top of that list.
Yeah,
and
but
am I wrong, or I don't know? Like, what's your opinion? I'm asking for your opinion on this.
You're wrong because there's no data to back that up either way. But what
I mean, just from when I say that, I don't mean scientifically. I mean from experience, like from what you've seen.
Well, from my experience, that's just not the case.
Really?
With the variety of animals I've kept, there are these moments that it's just like there's something more to this creature. So with my orchid mantis Pixie, when he was a little baby, I was trying to basically train him so that I could handle him. And that is something you can do with mantids. You basically associate yourself with food, and then they'll just kind of jump onto you, even if you don't have food when they're older and that stuff. But for some reason, when he grew up, he entered like a phase almost, like a teenage phase, where he just didn't want to be touched. And he grew in his wings. If you guys don't know, full-grown mantises have wings, and juveniles do not. And so he would just pretty much jump away from me. But if he was on the bottom of his terrarium, then he would let me pick him up in order to bring him to the top. And that was the only time. That mantis was lazy. I swear. That is laziness in a bug. Another
True, but
continue.
no, because you're adding like experience to this, and this is what's important about this conversation is that a personal experience, in my opinion, is what really shapes people's opinions on animals. So I feel like sharing personal experiences when it comes to these things is what really helps people see it from your perspective.
Yeah.
So yeah, continue. So continue with what you were going to say.
So the second mantis I kept was one that I had actually like rescued right before winter. So I live in a temperate environment, which basically means that there are seasons. And so it was fall, and I was driving in my car, and I noticed that there was this baby mantis on my windshield, and I was like, well, it's basically freezing out here. He will die in a couple hours if I do not save him. And so I didn't know what to do, so I parked my car, I got out, I picked him up off my windshield. I didn't have anything to put him in, so I just like put him on my pants and then continued driving. And then I went to the thing I had to go to, and while I was there, I just left him in my trunk because I didn't know what to do. And I came back, and he was just in there. It was fine, and eventually I got back to my house. And a couple months later, he was recouped back to health. And it was just weird because he was the most trusting little mantis ever, and like he would almost, I would say he liked being handled. He would actively want to climb on me, and he would not want to climb off of me into his enclosure. And he would like jump from my one hand to the other hand. He was the cutest little thing. Unfortunately, he didn't quite make it to adulthood. I presume he failed to molt, which is something that's not too uncommon with a lot of insects, but he lived a lot longer than he would have in the wild.
Everybody press F in the chat for, what was the name of your mantis again?
I called him Cuttlebug.
Everybody press F in the chat for Cuttlebug.
F.
F in the chat. F. Anyway, but my counter argument to that, or to that experience, is that I could see why that would make it feel a bit human. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like it could make that bond. But in my opinion, like the way I would see it, the way I could flip it, would be like the reason why he would like doing that is because like he had a better vantage point of it by being in your hands, because you would be holding him at a certain height, so he could see a lot more. You know what I mean? Like yeah, I could see it from more of a.
I'm sure there was that kind of factoring to it as well.
Not to be mean, I would say not because he would do these things not because he likes you, but because it was useful. It was useful in a way. But I mean, but that's the thing about us humans. The thing I appreciate about humans is that like you watch all these movies and TV shows. Like you watch Planet of the Apes, and you watch like all these like AI movies where AIs come to life, or like we make advanced robots and we treat them badly, or we treat them and stuff like that. But the thing about us humans is that we really do get attached to things that like don't get attached back. Like, you know what I mean? Like we can get attached to objects, we can get attached to like animals, we can get attached to so many things and like treat them like people, and you know what I mean? Like a person can get anybody can expect this. A person can get a toaster, put googly eyes on it, call it Steve, and then treat it like an actual person. You know what I mean? So like when I see all these movies where people are kicking robots and like being like spitting on them, be like, trash, you're just a machine. You know what I mean? Like, or like Planet of the Apes. Planet of the Apes is a bit more relatable because there's a lot of animal cruelty in this world, but like, you know what I mean? Like people just being like, it's just an animal, put it down. You know what I mean? Like when it comes to like I said, like the robots, like, oh, it's just a robot, like it's a machine. You don't think you're just AI. You know what I mean? Like it's like I feel like if something shows enough human behavior, I feel like we just get really attached. Like it's just like we just show attachment to it.
It's always a matter of individual perspective and how you've been
exactly
wired. So yeah, it depends on your upbringing and how you're basically taught to treat other things around you. And so some things can be, if you're repeatedly told, for instance, to bring up the sad topic of slavery.
You know what? Yeah. that might get me canceled, but You know
Okay,
what?
yeah.
You know how?
You guys get the
Yeah.
point.
To bring that up, that is actually. Let's just say that what you just said right now is a good counter argument to what I just said.
Yeah.
that is
We
a
don't have
great
to
counter
discuss that
argument
more.
to what you just said. Let's just move on then.
Yeah.
Let's just sweep that under. But let's just say that slavery is a good counter argument to that. Anyway, moving
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
next 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 facet. But yeah, what was I gonna say? But yeah, I guess that is true. But like you said, I think it really does depend on the person. But I think looking at the times now and just looking at the way the world is like changing and the way it's turning and the way just humans are, like I feel like humans are becoming more empathetic and more like relatable to each other than they ever been, like in the past like 500, 600 years.
You're
Like
right. Yeah.
I think the closest we ever got to that, and I might be 100% wrong because I'm not an avid historian, but I think the Roman Empire, because like the Roman Empire spanned, like I think the more we globalize, the more we become connected as a planet. You know what I mean? As humans. You know what I mean? Like we live in an age where I can talk to somebody who lives like halfway across the world. I can talk to people who live right next door without even seeing them. Like you know what I mean? Like I can consume content and culture and different things from any part of the world just with the touch of a finger. You know what I mean? Like I feel like with the more knowledge and the more we are just shown, or like the more we just consume of, we have the notion that there's a bigger world than what's around us, than what's in the general area, like of like what we can like there's a bigger world than where you can, like the world is bigger than the places you can walk to or the places you can drive to. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Definitely. The more exposure
So
we
I feel like
have.
the more we realize that people are people, like these people, you're sure they act different, and the more like they look different and they do things differently. But like I think like the more that we become connected by understanding and learning these things, I feel like the world is becoming a softer place. I'm not gonna say a better place, but I feel like a softer place would be a better way of explaining it.
Slowly. Yep.
And I mean that in a social way. I feel like in a lot of different other ways, it's becoming a much harsher place. You know what I mean? Like,
It depends on who you are and where
yeah,
you
it depends
are.
on who you are. But I mean, like from a social standpoint, I feel like it's becoming a softer place. But in a harder standpoint, from a lot of other standpoints, it is becoming a harder place, like a lot harsher. I mean, like, now like you could have one
Depends on
profession,
country and leadership and all those other things. But yeah.
and not just that. I think it really just has to do with I think it really just has to do with what with your experiences in life, and like what like yeah, I think it just really has to do with what you've experienced through life, even if it's only been like a very short amount of time. Like you and me, man, like we haven't even been around for like, let's just say like we haven't even been around for a decade, or like not decade. We haven't been around for like 2-3 decades yet. There's people out there who've been around for like 10 of those, and some of them they haven't experienced as much stuff as we have for a certain reason. And there's also probably the exact opposite, where there's probably people younger than us who have probably experienced more than we'll probably ever will in life. You know what I mean? It's a very small amount of people, but it exists. You know what I mean? Like for me, it's like even as long as there's a 1% chance of it happening or existing, it probably does exist. Because like you know what I mean?
One of the factors that tends to create these kind of tensions in the world between people, various types and whatnot, is that humans tend to be very tribal as part of their nature, as how we've like adapted to confronting other unknown groups. We have to be taught in order to accept other groups from whatever we're raised in, not necessarily what we're born as, but the culture that we're raised in accepts. So in order to break down the barriers, we kind of have to learn and work together as a big group in order to break down all those individual tribes and kind of create almost one big all-encompassing tribe. And that's what I'm really hopeful about the whole oof virus situation, is that we are all globally having this issue, and we can all choose to band together and fix it. And if we do that, then we can start banding together to fix other global issues, like climate problems, ecosystem problems, political problems, equality problems, etc.
Well, I'm gonna be honest with you. The reason why I'm kind of pessimistic about that is because, like, to me, people will only, like, help the world. People will only help the world, or people will only do things once it affects them. You know what I mean? They will really only. A lot of people, like, will most of the time will only take action, when it starts affecting them. Like like this whole coronavirus thing is a good example. The early stages, everyone just didn't care. They just decided it wouldn't affect them and that they'd be perfectly fine and they had nothing to worry about. They were just localized in one area and that it would not, like, and then, like, it would just stay there and we wouldn't have to worry about anything. But, like, now just look what happened. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Look what happened.
Because they're very good at helping in-group members as a general whole, particularly with the more Asian type of cultures tend to be, like, individuals tend to be more focused on helping members of their in-group, which is essentially people that fit into whatever their brain naturally categorizes as people like them. And so their rates of altruism, or helping without reward, go way up when it's someone in their in-group. But whereas, like, more Western cultures, they're tend to be more efficient at helping out-group members because there's a higher focus on individuality. And so by creating, if we can somehow merge these two groups together and kind of have one big tribe almost through events like this. Like, there have been psychological studies that show how you can take two opposing groups and give them one problem that they both have to work with and make them work together, and once they work together, they become bonded to each other to some extent, and then they just help each other, and they become friends that way. And so I'm hoping we can get most of the people in the world to kind of work together with these big problems that we're experiencing now.
I'm going to be honest with you. I feel like that will only really happen if we discover another, like, dominant species. Be it aliens or just be it on Earth somewhere. Until we discover, unless we discover another, like, group that is biologically different from us, like, in a very large way. I feel like that kind of connection, like, that you're talking about, that you think will happen, but in my opinion, will like I said, will not happen unless we have somebody way more different than us. Then I feel like until that happens, we're probably still going to stay separate. But once we do find that group, I feel like then that's when we're actually going to unite. You know what I mean?
So you're thinking like a common enemy kind of thing.
Not a common enemy. Like, they don't have to be enemies. I'm just saying, like, just another group of people to gank on. You know what I mean? Like, another group for people to
a scapegoat.
A scapegoat, pretty much. You know what I mean? Like that's the thing I always find funny. Like, I always find kind of funny in, like, fantasy and like sci-fi. You know what I mean? Like, fantasy, like, you have the humans, you have the elves, you have the orcs, and you have, like, you have like the dwarves and stuff like that. Like we're just humans living out here, and we already have a bunch of problems. But, like, when you go into fantasy and sci-fi world, like, all the humans get along perfectly fine. You know what I mean? But they just have problems with everybody else. But like it's not. It's. I feel like that is a good example and a good explanation of what would happen. Once we start, like, if we ever meet these other dominant species, like, we are going to unify, and we're just going to stop having these problems that we have each other, because we're just going to start having problems with the other, like, the other species and stuff like that. You know what I mean?
That's why equality problems have arisen among our own species, is because we're designating members of our own species as parts of other groups for various reasons. But it's the same concept.
Yeah, but just give it. To me, the one thing I always say that's basically like the one thing I always say that, at the end of the day is probably just give it time and the problem will fix itself.
I mean, that's a good way to not get things done, but I'm not one to talk, so.
No, but to me, it's like, in my opinion, if you give anything enough time, it will get worse. But, like, but, like, the thing about hitting rock bottom is it can't go anywhere. It'll eventually start going up. Maybe it'll just keep going up.
With our
The question is, are you willing to rough ride it the entire way? That's the difference. The difference between that ideology and then the ideology of fixing it immediately is that, like, the problem with fixing things immediately is that, first off, you're going to have to find the resources and the willingness of people to do it. The one thing I've realized throughout my life is that to find people who are willing to do anything is hard.
Yeah.
At least in my opinion, to find anybody who is willing to, and when I say willing, not willing just to say like I'll do it, like people who are willing to say I'll do it and consistently do it. You know what I mean? Like not like just not like halfway through, just be like, you know what? Yeah, I'm just going to throw in the towel. You know what I mean? Just find people who will consistently finish something from beginning to end is the hardest thing you'll ever do in your life. You know what I mean?
That's especially it's like passionate people, like
fit them in the short term.
You mean like in the short term? Or
because people only really look in the short term, they never look in the long term.
Oh, well,
you know what I mean?
Yeah. So you have to appeal to people's like inner desires to an extent. So while
that's why you gotta lie to them. I'm sorry, but
yeah, well, you don't necessarily, because you can always find something. It's a matter of figuring out what an individual person is passionate about, and it's usually a result of life experience. They have some kind of encounter that changes their perspective on something, and they want to fix that aspect of the world. And so you have to find something that people will be devoted to in that way. So for me, it is mainly zoology, and so I want to work for conservation efforts, endangered species, and all those kinds of things. But you can also find other people who work for other things, for like equality of certain groups or certain economic positions, etc., etc.
Honestly, in my opinion, I feel like we are way closer to fixing. We're going to be way. I think we're more likely to fix the Earth than to fix our own internal problems. You know what I mean? I feel like we are way closer to changing the planet than we are to solving our own internal issues, because that's just a whole can of worms. And in my opinion, like the hardest thing to do is try to convince somebody who, if somebody's been told they're right their entire life and then somebody tells them they're wrong, try to convince that person that they're wrong is going to be the hardest task ever. So just so you know what I mean. So to me, it's like,
I agree there.
Going back to animals, I was thinking about when we're talking about like the humanity of, the one thing that always surprises me is just how human some of these things are. Like I've been watching a lot of these tests and stuff that they do on chimpanzees and like chimpanzee behavior and like just behavior in general. I just look at our closest DNA related cousins, the primates. I look at all these species, and like I just see the things they do, and I just think to myself, huh. Like let's give a good example. Orangutans. All right, orangutans, interesting creatures. They're like orangutans are probably one of the smartest primates out there. I would even dare say they're probably smarter than
chimpanzees.
So I would say, so for me, like if you look at orangutans, like there was this one study where they gave an orangutan a saw, and he just started cutting up leaves and trees and like branches and stuff, and that was crazy. But then there was another one where like an orangutan like hijacked a boat, like a wooden boat, and then just used it to sail down the river to get to the mango grove that was the most ripe fruit of the season, because it was just newly grown. And then I saw that orangutans also, there was this group of orangutans that learned how to spearfish from watching villagers like spearfishing. So they were just seeing, they're like, all right, let's grab a sharp stick and let's just start hitting it against the water and see if we can catch some. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's always cool kind of things like that. I remember hearing about orangutans learning how to use soap, and like finding soap left behind by people and then just passing it to their group mates and being like, here, go wash your hands, it's Corona time.
But that's the crazy thing about it. Like, I'm gonna be honest with you, there's probably like people always talk about like how dirty and like savage animals are, but I'm gonna be honest with you, there's probably some animals out there that are way more clean than some people on this planet, like some humans on this planet. You know what I mean?
I remember hearing that Madagascar hissing cockroaches, I've heard that they clean themselves after they touch humans.
That is honestly like a flex and an insult at the same time. That's a flinsult. Exactly. that's a Flintstone right there. A Flintstone, no. But a good example that always comes to my mind is Japanese macaques. You ever heard of Japanese macaques? Like it's like the
Oh
what?
yeah, the trading items. Is that those
Oh yeah,
guys?
yeah. First things first. They trade fruits and nuts for massages from each other, and many other things. Sometimes they trade fruits and nuts for copulation,
Yeah,
and
I've heard about that with chimps too.
and grooming. You know what I mean? So you already see that like these primates already know how to do very human-like things,
Yep.
but also just like they just like taking baths, and I wouldn't blame them. Like they go to these like hot springs, like these nice warm like springs of of water that really, like the minerals have like some, and they have little gang wars over these things. Like like they literally like fight each other just for the just to have these personal hot springs that they can hang out in. You know,
Yeah, you gotta take
crazy.
your boys to the club.
Yeah. Also, that like for me, like if I had to live with any animal for a year, I would totally live with just Japanese macaques in the Japanese forest, man. Just go around eating fruits and nuts, and just chilling in the baths, like just chilling there with the warm water, just like a jacuzzi, like a literal natural jacuzzi. It's crazy. So yeah, to me, like those guys are probably one of the cleanest animals out there. Um, Something I also find crazy, like when I look at it, is moving away from primates. If you look, like I look at lions and like those kind of like animals, like pride animals. I mean, like the way they just act around each other. Like there's something uh kind of human about it. You know what I mean? I don't know. I will say though. I will say though that I think we're reaching the end of our podcast, and I think we should do our little goodbyes. But before we say goodbye, I would like to talk about my sponsors for today. Raid Shadow Legends.
Of
Raid Shadow
course.
Legends. But man, yeah, this has been a long episode, man. Like it's been one of my longest. Yeah, this has been a long episode. I think this has been one of my longest episodes. But I think this is gonna be good enough for those people who are just sitting at home or they're waiting for a podcast. I would like to thank Ronan. Ronan, thank you for your time. Thank you for being here, and
Thanks for having me. It was
and
great.
and I can't believe we spent like almost an hour and a half just talking about animals. You know what I mean? Like I feel like if we have any animal fans out there I don't have a name for my fandom yet. I got to think of something. I don't know, but for my fans, like anybody has animal fans out there, they're probably gonna love this.
Tony Troopers, maybe?
No, I was thinking I was thinking of the. I don't know. It doesn't even have to be Tony in it. It can just be anything. You know what I mean? I was thinking of. I was thinking of some names. I'll come up with some names for the next episode, and we can go over it. And then the fans, we can do a vote on my Instagram to see who what names we can get for it. But yeah, thank you everybody for watching. Thank you for no, not for watching. Thank you everybody for listening to my podcast. Thank you Ronan for being here and having this conversation with me.
No problem.
I want to plug in my Instagram. Follow me at Toni Talks on Instagram. If you're listening to this on a platform, if you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple Music and Apple Podcasts, if you're listening to this on Google Podcasts, please follow me there, or just rate this episode if you want. You can. So where can they find you, Ronan? Where can they find you?
My YouTube channel is EarthTamerRonan. No spaces between any of them. EarthTamerRonan.
All right, so yes, so follow Ronan. He has a lot of good content, a lot of animal content, a lot of Minecraft content, also like that kind of stuff. So please follow him. And next episode we'll have a new guest. We'll have and we'll probably try some different things. We'll probably talk about some different stuff. I might actually do a Q&A next episode. But thank you everybody for listening. And if you're still paying attention, I don't know. Just have a nice day. Try to stave off the boredom from this quarantine. I know it's been hard on a couple of you guys. Stay safe. Wash your hands. Exactly. You know what I mean?
Wash them right now.
Yes. Go wash your hands after listening to this. Go dance like nobody's looking. Do some karaoke. Do something. Just cheer yourself up and try to get yourself out of that slump.
Do something.
But yeah, thank you everyone for listening and have a nice day.
Bye.